who's ready to share their solutions. You ready? All right. So you'll see the picture, and we're also going to talk about the real ones that we have here. Alyssa, talk to us about what you did.
Yeah, so I used the concrete tools, and I decided to use one color for fiction and one for nonfiction. And I just kind of worked with the different combinations to get to the total of 5. So I came up with these 6 solutions, and I'm pretty sure I found all of them.
Okay, so when you're looking around in your classroom, do you think that your kids would come up with all of these solutions the first time?
No, not generally, but they might have a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you know that you're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different solutions, you can walk around and strategically choose students who didn't. Some kids might just come up with this one solution. Some kids might come up with just this one, or different combinations of each. So we definitely just want to be strategic as to what we're looking for.
Okay, so like I could say I see a student that has all of one type of book, and then another student that has 4 of that type and then 1 of the other. So that could kind of be a start to our conversation, right? And then maybe another student has that. And even if not, even if I don't have a student that has one of these, I can add that in if I need to, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of more organized.
Yeah. Yeah, you want your students to be looking for patterns throughout the unit. And so that's really the end expectations, is we want our kids to be noticing the patterns between the tools and the pictures and the numbers as well. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
What would you ask, say Johnny came up with this one, what would you ask Johnny about his tools?
I was thinking I'd ask him, like, what do the cubes represent? So hopefully he'll say that they represent nonfiction books. But then I was thinking, wait a minute, the problem said that there were 2 types of books. So I'm wondering about that solution.
Yeah, in the problem it said that fiction and nonfiction are in the bin. So would this way work?
I would argue that it doesn't match the problem.
Right, yeah. And so I think that it's really important that we question our students, does this match the problem? And if these are the fiction, can there only be fiction books, or does there have to be both for them to understand that these really wouldn't match the problem? There are types where it would match, so it's really important for us to know when these would match and when these wouldn't match. So I'm just going to set these to the side. All right, so now that you've got your pattern kind of going and you've got your different students sharing, what kinds of connections can you make between the pattern that you're wanting students to see?
I would want students to see that all of them are 5. So the sum is 5. The total is the same for every one, but the addends are changing and how they're changing, like how one is getting less and one is growing or shrinking or being greater or less than.
Yeah, exactly. And we know we can use the language of increasing and decreasing. Our students aren't going to use that language, but we can use that language, and then they'll start to use it. So thinking about you have 1, 2, 3, 4 nonfiction books, because that's what the red represents, in 1 fiction, and then going from 4 nonfiction to 3 nonfiction and 2 fiction, and then talking about the pattern and the connections that the kids see.
Right. Okay. So then what?
That's a good question. So do we want our kids to be living with the manipulatives forever?
No, I mean, eventually we want them to connect to other strategies.
Exactly. So I think I have an example to show you that is going to help make that connection with you. Looking up at our chart, and you also see the chart on our slide, we're thinking about ways we can connect this pictorial example, which would be on the board in your classroom, and it would be more of a pictorial example because the students aren't interacting with it like they're interacting with their tools.
I might have a student who drew on 10 frame. Like if I gave them 10 frames, some students might actually have drawn this or something similar.
Exactly. And if you have that example, I would for sure use the student's example over a teacher-created example, because the kids learn best from each other. So thinking about this pictorial example and the tools here, what do you think you could do to connect these two?
So I think students who use the concrete tools really would benefit from noticing where in the 10 frame their cubes are. Like if a student has 4 fiction and 1 nonfiction, where are those books in the 10 frame?
Exactly. And then connecting it to the cubes, where are the 4 fiction and the 1 nonfiction, and putting them side by side so students actually see. I can see that there's 4 nonfiction and 1 fiction in the tools as well as the pictures. And then that leads to the number representations where you can then take all 3 and connect. We've got 4 nonfiction, 1 fiction in our tools, 4 nonfiction, 1 fiction in our picture, and then we have with our expressions 4 nonfiction and 1 fiction.
So if I do have a student who wrote the equation, that's when I could bring them in and say, how does this person's equation, how did these representations help you understand the equation and connect all of them together?
Exactly. Thinking about how we just made these connections with our kiddos, what are you thinking about, like, what are you looking for the students to be able to do by the end of this unit?
So for this type of a problem, I want students to know that there can be multiple answers. If we know the sum, we can find all kinds of different addends, and I want them to be able to work with a strategy that makes sense to them, so whether that's a concrete tool or a picture or a drawing. But the important thing that I'm saying I need to do here is help them connect to the strategies so that they can see how they're all related.
Absolutely. And if you have a student that's always solving with tools, having them work with groups or partners to see different ways and explore different ways is really important for their learning as well. We also want to make sure that our students towards the end are creating and noticing those patterns. And the only way that's going to happen is with our strategic questioning and our strategic pulling up of students to share.
Right. Like maybe even have an anchor chart of this.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great anchor chart. And also remember, we were making sure that we were explaining what the tools meant. So we want to make sure that students are explaining what their tools represent in relationship to the problem. So whether these are lollipops or books,
right.
They're not just 10 frames or cubes. All right, so that is our first math dive in 5. Alyssa, I hope I helped you understand the difference between these problem types a little bit more.
Yes, I'm feeling more confident to go in and attack a kindergarten lesson. And so, yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.